Frontline Conversations, leading the debate since 1984.
Hello and welcome to Frontline Conversations with me, Amit Barua. The spectacular victory of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria has shocked observers and sent shock waves through the region. Not just the region, but the entire world, because so many parties from the United States to the Russians are embedded in the story. It's been a long 1 year for West Asia, with the carnage unleashed by the Israelis in Palestine being just one part of the story. We then had the conflict move to Lebanon, where thankfully there is a ceasefire, though Israeli jets keep pounding the country. And then we see this spectacular collapse of the Assad regime from late November to early December. We also see the Israelis moving quickly to occupy the rest of the Golan, an area which it has occupied, the Golan Heights, since 1967, in violation of all UN resolutions from the Security Council. There is, depending on your outlook, people are celebrating the victory in Syria. You can see the large numbers of people come out looking for their loved ones from different prisons. There are also questions about what kind of regime will take power in Syria. To discuss all this, I have with me Talmiz Ahmad, one of India's foremost experts on West Asia. Talmiz has been not just a spokesman of the Indian Foreign Ministry, but he has been ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. And he's also served in various diplomatic capacities in Kuwait, Iraq, and Yemen. So there's really nobody who knows the region better than Talmiz. And welcome to Frontline Conversations, Talmiz.
Thank you very much, Amit.
So I just wanted to get a sense. I've been reading your pieces in Frontline quite avidly, what you've been writing about developments in West Asia. But specifically on Syria, this spectacular collapse of the Assad regime, in your view, what does it mean for Syria, Syrians, and the region?
The collapse of the Assad regime has come as a surprise. Ever since 2021, we had the impression that Syria has now been rehabilitated and made part of the Arab mainstream. Many countries of the Gulf started opening their embassies in Damascus. Foreign ministers started visiting each other. Bashar Assad attended the Arab League summit, and therefore it appeared as if, as far as Syria is concerned, things are normal. So we took our eyes off that small entity called the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham that has been firmly established at Idlib over last several years. Yes, it was an unresolved issue, but it was not something that was viewed as threatening. We also knew that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is supported by Turkey. Turkey has deep interests, particularly in the northern areas of Syria, because it keeps an eye on the Kurdish community located in the northeast. These Kurdish forces have been consolidated by the Americans into the Syrian Democratic Forces, and the Turks have been constantly having military encounters with them. The Turkish concern is obviously that there is a very close nexus between the dissident Kurds in Turkey itself and their brethren across the border. And indeed, it has been known that Syria provides sanctuary, training, rehabilitation, medical facilities to those Kurds who flee across the border into Syria. So that has been the Turkish agenda, and that has now come to fruition.
So, we are seeing all these images coming out of Syria. What is your sense? Will there be a stable regime in Syria, or will this mean further splintering and further instability in the country?
As of now, it is very difficult to predict. The historical background, as far as West Asia is concerned, when we look at the experience of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, it is very difficult to be optimistic about stability and security when a ragtag military group takes over the capital. You are aware that what has happened in Afghanistan with regard to that. Of course, all historical experiences are unique in its and they take place in a specific context. But very broadly, the record of extremist movements in terms of governance has been usually very unsatisfactory. Very often, they are playthings of external forces who use them for their own strategic benefit and advantage. The impression being given today, particularly through the media, is that there is the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham administration that is slowly taking shape and indeed has even provided a prime minister, that it is stable, that it has been welcomed, that it has abandoned its extremist background, that it is anxious to focus on development, and that it does not want to have any any hostile relations with anyone, and even they have even reached out to the Russians. This is the background. But I am a skeptic. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has had a small experience of governance in Italy, but that does not tell you how to run the country. Syria is one of the very large country. It has been riven with discord and conflict for about 13 years. Even Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is made up of numerous militia units and factions and aggressive leaders. We have still, I am therefore at this point, I am a skeptic. I believe that that Syria is looking at a long period of instability. I would also like to point out that Syria's interests are not served by the constant Israeli attacks. Israel wants to totally emasculate the country. They are attacking their defense units regularly. They have attacked the navy, and now they are every day there are launching major attacks. I cannot imagine that this can form the basis for stability and goodwill over the months to come. Therefore, at this stage, I must confess, I am a skeptic.
So, what is your sense? I mean, the Israeli forays into Lebanon and now this occupation of the Golan and almost 350 strikes on Syrian military facilities by the Israelis. What is your sense? You use the word very correctly, in my view, emasculate. Is this is this
Israel's agenda has a combination of security interests, strategic interests, and domestic political interests for the prime minister. Look at each of these separately. Israel was absolutely shocked and traumatized by the Hamas attack of 7th October last year. All the standing of their armed forces, their intelligence, their political leadership came down into the dust. And overnight, the Israeli community was lost its confidence in its political and military leadership. The entire effort of the prime minister since then has been to rehabilitate himself. And therefore, he has unleashed the entire military power that Israel enjoys. His effort is to inflict such extraordinary damage upon the Palestinians and the Hezbollah and the Syrians and the Iranians, so that he would look he would restore confidence in him and his leadership among the Israeli people. And hence you will see the wanton carnage that has been inflicted upon Gaza, which has no apparent strategic advantage. With regard to Hezbollah, he was able to inflict on them a hammer blow through the killing of very large numbers of their cadres and their top leadership. Something similar has happened with regard to Syria. I cannot say to you at this point whether Israel was an active role player in effecting the coup d'etat. The reason for my holding back on this is because both Hafez al-Assad and Bashar Assad actually had a very good working relationship with the Israelis. We also know there has been a lot of exchange of intelligence. Bashar Assad was viewed by Israel as someone who kept the forces of chaos, including Islamic extremists, at bay. Yes, Iran was present in order to defend him over the last decade, both militarily and with the presence of Hezbollah. But with the help of the Russians, the Israelis were able to ensure that they did not threaten Israel's security. Now, what has happened is that in the context of the Gaza war, Israel now wants to prove to itself as well as to the entire region that it is the sole power in the region. What it is now doing with regard to Syria is to ensure that their military capabilities are totally ended. What is the larger purpose? The larger purpose is to ensure the demolition of all Arab regimes in West Asia that are not accommodative of Israel's maximalist agenda. First it was Iraq, and then it was now Syria, and of course, Iran remains the principal target. So, ensuring that there is no power in West Asia that can ever threaten Israel's interest is the principal agenda. Simultaneously, Netanyahu has ensured that he has restored his standing in Israel. His popularity ratings have gone up. He is once again viewed as Mr. Security, and therefore, and he, with his extreme right wing government, today have a free hand in carrying out wanton mass murder at will. Also, you will find in this scenario an extraordinarily weak and incompetent role of the Americans. Despite everything that Biden has said over the last year and a half, the Americans have not been able to, and perhaps have not wished to, take any effective action against the carnage that Israel has inflicted upon the region with no apparent long term strategic purpose. Israel has made it clear they are not interested in a peace process, they are not interested in a two-state solution, they are not interested in accommodating any aspect of Palestinian aspiration. So the weakness of Israel, the desire of Netanyahu to rehabilitate himself, and taking advantage of the Gaza war, inflict upon the region such destruction that at least for a few years, no one will rear his head or her head against Israeli interests.
And what is your sense? I mean, we saw Antony Blinken in the region, the US Secretary of State, the outgoing US Secretary of State, in which he admits openly that the Americans are in direct contact with Hayatul Tahrir Sham. The British also are looking at ways and means to deal with this organization, which is a proscribed terror organization under UN security resolutions. So, is it possible that even prior to this, the Americans and the British and other Western allies have been in touch with this organization?
My own sense is as follows: the Turks and the Americans have worked very closely to bring about the downfall of Bashar Assad. The Americans have known for many years the close ties that the Turkish government have had with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. In fact, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has survived so many years largely under Turkish patronage. We are aware that a few years ago, possibly 2017, 2019, the Syrian army was actually poised to attack Idlib and destroy Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It is Turkey that intervened strongly with Russia and Iran as part of the Astana peace process to ensure that this did not happen, and assured their allies that they will be taking care of the HTS. It appears to me what has happened over the last few years is that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has been steadily built up as a robust military force with direct Turkish involvement. I am absolutely confident that the Americans have been involved with this entire enterprise from the very beginning. They have, for them, the issues are very clear. They have wanted to bring Syria into the Western fold for several decades. Ever since Bashar Assad became president in year 2000, they had put forward to him that you come on board with us, cut off your ties with Russia and with Iran, and we will support you economically. At that time, Bashar al-Assad had conveyed one simple message: give me back Golan Heights. If I get back Golan Heights, I can assure my people that what I am doing, moving to the Western camp, makes sense. But obviously, the Americans could not deliver the Golan Heights because that involves Israel, and that matter had withered away. What you are seeing now is the culmination of Turkish and American effort to wean Syria away from the axis of resistance and its close alignment with Iran and Russia, and now come into the Western camp. I think that has been the American strategic purpose, and towards that end, they have been directly involved. For Blinken to say that they are in touch now is not relevant. They have been in touch for a few years, I would say.
Right. So that's the question which I want to ask you, Talmiz Saab, which is combating terrorism of various hues, whether it is ISKP, Al Qaeda, is that a bigger priority for the Americans, or is giving the Russians a bloody nose in Syria of greater importance to America and its foreign policy?
Combating terrorism has never been an American priority. Americans' interest is entirely in terms of their strategic advantage. You will remember that, in fact, the Americans are the fathers of modern Islamic extremism by putting together the global jihad in Afghanistan, along with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. They have always, till then, looked at Islam, the political and the faith and the political aspects of it, as natural allies of the West against godless communism. It is only the attack upon the United States on 9/11 that suddenly the Americans discovered the scourge of jihad, and, and then entered into the so called global war on terror. But they have been quite accommodative of various groups whenever it has served their purpose. Look, recall here as I speak to you their engagement with the Taliban. They were engaged with the Taliban over many years and had meetings with the Taliban, encouraged the opening of the Taliban office at Doha.
And they had to then scoot away from Afghanistan, and they had to leave.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
the record that I am mentioning to you is very murky. As far as HTS is concerned, HTS has deliberately projected a new image of themselves. Various American entities like CNN and PBS have actually talked to the leader Abu Muhammad Jolani and there is now a projection in the Western world that here is a reasonable, moderate, possibly even liberal person. There have been conversations about how he respects minorities, how he is respectful of women's rights. He has also projected himself rather well. So I would say to you that the larger strategic interest of getting rid of Iran from Syria, cutting off ties with Hezbollah, and giving the Russians a bloody nose, these are the priorities as far as the Americans are concerned, and controlling Syria.
So now we come to Iran, Talmisa. Uh, Iran is a country which has always stood up for the Palestinians. It is a country which has a military prowess, and it has also demonstrated whether those rocket attacks or missile attacks were efficacious or not. I'm not in a position to say, but they did launch those attacks after the strikes in Iran. So, what is your sense now? Where does Iran stand? Does it stand isolated, or will will the other players in West Asia, the other big players, the Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, these are important countries. How will they view this, in a sense, Western advance into Syria?
As far as Saudi Arabia and UAE are concerned, and I would add Qatar to the list, I think there will be a sense of satisfaction in regard to the change.
And why do you say that? Why do you say that, Talmisa?
Yeah, they have been anxious to get Syria back into the Arab mainstream and rather than as part of the axis of resistance. Syria also, has been ruled for the last 5 decades by an Alawite family, while 90% of the country is Sunni. So obviously, you will now have Sunni empowerment, which adds to the to some extent to the influence that Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar will wield in that place. So there would be a degree of satisfaction. With regard to Iran, I would say very frankly that Iranian strategy, in the context of the sanctions that they have had over 40 years, given their given their weak military prowess, they have functioned on the basis of proxies. They have built up support systems in the shape of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iraqi Shia militia, as also the Houthis, over a period of time to ensure that that the threats to them and the fighting that they are involved with takes place very far from their borders. So their borders are now, were till recently in Lebanon and in Gaza and in various other places far away rather than at their own. Israel has systematically ensured that these proxy support sources that Iran has enjoyed as part of the axis of resistance is now over, and that they will not be able to support Iran. So Iran is now directly confronted. Iran's own conventional capacity is very, very fragile, very weak, fairly limited, and compared to the Israelis who have state of the art capability. So I would say to you, militarily, I would say at this point, Iran is extremely weak and vulnerable militarily. On the diplomatic side, my own sense is Saudi Arabia is likely to continue to maintain the cordial relations that were established last year under the Beijing Accord, and I think that their diplomatic, political, and economic ties will continue. I don't believe that the Arabs are going to turn their backs on the Iranians just yet. In China and Iran and Russia will also continue to be close to the regime, close to the Iranian regime. The challenges that Iran faces, besides the military threat from Israel, which Netanyahu has talked about from time to time, I think the challenges it faces are overwhelmingly domestic. The sanctions have destroyed their economy. It has created some significant disgruntlement among their people. Very often, you get really irritated when you find that their local authorities prioritize concerns relating to the hijab. It sounds completely out of tune with what is happening in the region and the rest of the world. I would say to you that the challenges are overwhelmingly domestic. They are connected with the future of the supreme leader and his successor, the free hand that the president, who's considered a reformist, the free hand that the president enjoys, and his capacity to actually affect change. What will be the role of the IRGC? After all, over 40 years of Islamic rule, you have very powerful vested interests in favor of the status quo. Therefore, change in Iran, while significantly urgent, they will find it very difficult to meet many of these challenges. If
And
there is
yeah,
stability, if they are not attacked, one moment, if they are not attacked by the Israelis, which is what the Israelis are talking about, and we don't know whether they will attack or whether it will be with the Americans now before Trump takes over or after Trump takes over. If the Israelis do not attack, the Iranians will get some time to effect some of the urgently required economic and social changes that the country desperately needs.
And what is your sense on Russia? I mean, they showed themselves to be some kind of a player in Syria at a very critical time for the Assad regime. So, is it going to be a long-term departure from the region for the Russians, given that they are very busy with whatever's happening in Ukraine?
My own information is from media reports that Russians continue to retain their naval base and air base in Latakia province. So, to that extent, it would appear that no change on the ground has occurred. Secondly, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's leader has made an overture to the Russians and has asked them to become his partners in the development of the country. So, to that extent, the Russian presence remains intact. The principal change in regional and world affairs is connected with the war in Ukraine. The Ukraine war, where the war in Ukraine, as also the war in the Middle East, are connected. They are part of the larger Western effort to expand their strategic capacity and influence in crucial areas of the world, Europe and West Asia. As of now, it would appear that they have done reasonably well. In the case of Ukraine, very difficult to say whether Russians are on the back foot. The indications are perhaps they are not, but at a certain cost. Where West Asia is concerned as of now, it would seem to me that the Western alliance has done well. But what you are looking at is the strengthening of ties between Russia and China. And therefore, what you are looking at is the shaping at two levels of a new world order. At the military and strategic level, you have the contours of a new Cold War with the Western alliance on one side and the Russians and Chinese alliance on the other. On the economic side and on the diplomatic side, you have the shaping of a multipolar order with the emergence of role players which are considered to be middle powers. So the world is in a state of extraordinary churn. The American effort has been to ensure that their significant role in world affairs as leaders of the Western Alliance, as leaders of NATO, and having the projection of their power, particularly in the Indian Ocean, the West Pacific, and in West Asia, it is kept intact. To that extent, it would seem to me that on a broader canvas in West Asia, with the by giving the support they have given to the Israelis and Israelis being part of the Western alliance, the scenario is very much in the favor of the West strategically. Where Europe is concerned, the situation is still wide open because you not only see an increasing disenchantment in Europe with regard to supporting Ukraine, but you also see most of the major European countries experiencing considerable turmoil domestically. And then, of course, you have the emergence of Donald Trump, and we don't know his agenda, but he has indicated he would like to withdraw or rather diminish at least some American and Western role in Ukraine. He wants a deal. So we are looking at the global level at two significant developments: a new Cold War of the Western alliance facing an alliance of Russia and China, and as far as the region is concerned, a multipolar order where most of the countries within West Asia so far asserting strategic autonomy. The play in West Asia will be the American effort to wean the countries away from China and Russia and to rebuild, revive and rebuild the kind of Western hegemony that you had in West Asia till very recently.
Well, I think that's a fascinating analysis of what's going on, not just in West Asia, but linking it to what's happening in Europe and the global play of forces. And as you point out, interestingly, we are looking at a new Cold War in a sense. And presumably, we'll see different manifestations of this new Cold War, not just in West Asia, but in other key regions of the world in the years and decades to come. Thank you, Talmiz Ahmad, for talking to Frontline Conversations and presenting an analysis which is quite unmatched, given your vast experience as an Indian diplomat in at least half a dozen the states in West Asia. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Amit. I wish you all the best.
Frontline Conversations. Leading the debate since 1984.